Hello there. My name is Jackie, and I'm a climbing and life coach based out of Northern Ireland. And joining me today is Philippe, an executive coach based out of London.
Hello, Jackie.
Hello, Philippe. Today, we will be discussing a very common conversation in the workplace. That is talking to your boss about your workload. To assist us, we'll be using a dialogue tool based out of this book, Crucial Conversations, which, despite being published, I think, 20 years ago with other editions since then, it is still a very powerful and very commonly used resource on professional communication, personal communication. And we're going to be talking about one of the tools that is a main feature in it today.
No, totally, Jackie. And it's something that we have noticed in our practice as executive coaches, that a lot of our clients, coaches, come to us with an issue of workload. And what seems to be the problem is that they are afraid to discuss with their boss the workload which keeps piling up. So typically they start a job, everything is kind of hanky-dory at the beginning, and then as the work progresses, as the years pass by, the months pass by, the boss or the team is piling up more and more work. And being a committed team player, the client tends to take more work on, do more hours, and find themselves in a situation where they are stressed and they don't know how to get out of that. The only way to get out of that is to have a frank discussion with the direct manager or boss and discuss this issue. But there is a fear of doing so because they don't want to come across as not pulling their weight, not being team players, not being competent, not being able to do the work that they are supposed to do in the time which is allocated to them. So this is when really the situation of addressing the boss about the issue of workload becomes very important. In my 25 years running my business, I have actually come across that on a few occasions. As a manager, very often we don't realize, in fact, what we are doing. Most of the time, it's not intentional. So this is what we're going to discuss today, and we are going to give you a few lines that you can use nearly word for word to address that issue with your manager, your boss.
Yes, exactly. So I'm just going to continue on here. And I think what's important to identify is, from what you shared, Philippe, the context. So the backstory here: you work in a job, you have a boss or a direct manager. We're going to assume three things for the sake of our discussion. One, you enjoy your job. We're not getting into what you don't like. For the sake of our conversation, to keep this really practical and usable for you, one, you enjoy your job. Two, you have a moderately good relationship with your boss. And three, the most important, you'd like your workload reduced, adjusted in some way as the outcome of having this conversation with your boss.
Totally. And it ties up to work-life balance very often, which is the issue that happens very often with clients who have issues with workload, and it affects their work-life balance. But they become more and more stressed and less able to handle the situation.
Okay, cool. So shall we go into
part 3? So Jackie, you are going to talk about the dialogue tools. And before you get into it, there are a couple of things that are important to bear in mind before even starting the conversation. And it's really around the issue of clarity. One has to be very clear about what we want to get out of this discussion and where we are at the moment in terms of workload. So a couple of things that are useful as a kind of a checklist before we get into this conversation is to review the contract. We want to know what was the original agreement all about And we want to have some clarity about where we are at now compared to what we originally agreed. Mm-hmm. That's important. It's not vital, but it's important to have some sort of clarity on that. Mm-hmm. And also what's important to realize is what is the current workload. So we've got to do this kind of audit of what we are dealing with right now. Mm-hmm. An audit of the tasks, the priorities, the number of hours we're working, under what conditions we are working. So have a full report of what's the situation is right now. So when we are in the middle of a discussion about the workload with our boss, we are not talking from a position of emotion, but we are talking from a position of facts.
Yes, exactly.
I'm going to hand it to Jackie to explain how those tools work.
Great. Thanks, Philippe. Okay, so the dialogue tool that we're going to be reviewing today and going over today and sharing with you today is called contrasting. If you are following along in your Crucial Conversations book, the contrasting tool is introduced on page 85. And essentially, it's a don't/a do statement. What's kind of brilliant about this dialogue tool is that it has you come in to the conversation, start the conversation with almost an opposing worst case scenario intent that you then contrast with your actual intent. So it will sound like, I don't want you to think, example, I do want, or I don't want to come across as, I do want X. And lastly, I don't want to sound like, example, I do want, example.
Definitely. So maybe we can give a practical example.
Okay, so just so we're all clear, I'm just going to emphasize those three kind of early introduction phrases that will be kind of the backbone of the scripts that we're going to present to you today, and really that we encourage you to play with as a starting point as you're kind of getting comfortable with this dialogue tool. I don't want you to think, I don't want to come across as, and I don't want to sound like.
So for example, so the first one is I don't want you to think.
Yes. Because as I mentioned, the beauty of this is it has you think of the worst case impression that your boss could think. So for the sake of our conversation, the three things that we're using as a bit of a generic formula for today is that you're unmotivated, you have a poor work ethic, and that you're inflexible. So I think we introduced the dialogue tool and the three basic introduction kind of phrases. And then now we're going to say the three like worst case impressions that your boss could think. And then you put them together. And actually the do part, at least for me, the I do want part could actually be very similar for all three. I actually have the same response for all three. Also, the third question that will tie in, that can actually be a very similar question throughout them. So it's really the like first part that tends to be a little bit more of the customized part.
Sure. By the way, the first part, the I don't want, can be used several times in the conversations.
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, we should emphasize that in the summary.
There are a number of things that you don't want the boss to think of you as a result of that conversation.
Yes.
If there are three things that are important for you to come across as, then you could say, I don't want you to think, I don't want to come across as. Mm-hmm. So you could use several times, not in a row, but within the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I would say it's a bit like in coaching. When you start in coaching, you have these questions that are kind of guidelines of what kind of questions you could ask. And in a way, it's kind of similar in this conversation, that you have some framework or how to relaunch the conversation using that contrasting technique.
Yeah. Okay, so we did step 1, clarify your current situation. We did step 2, the dialogue tool, contrasting, and the 3 intro phrases. So now step 3 is you would like to reduce your workload in some way. You can think, I don't want my boss to think that by asking to reduce my workload or adjust my hours, I could be, or I am, unmotivated, uncommitted, that I have a poor work ethic, and that I'm not flexible or accommodating to the current demands of the company. So those are kind of the 3 things we want to avoid, and we want to contrast with our actual intent and our actual thoughts and feelings going into the conversation. So again, it will be the contrasting dialogue tool will be I don't want, I do want, and then the third part, which we haven't introduced until right now, but here it is going to be a question on how you can work together in dialogue to address your concern. So to just roll with the first script here, and I'm going to be referring to my notes a little bit, is I don't want you to think I'm not committed to my role. I really do enjoy my job here, and I want to deliver quality work within a schedule that is sustainable. Can we review my tasks, my task list? Can we review what's currently on my plate? So that's script 1.
I don't want to come across as X. I don't want you to think X. I want to be a team player. I want to, and then third part is what can we do to address these issues?
Exactly. Yeah. And for the sake of our discussion here, Philippe, I'm actually using the same I do want and the same kind of ending question each time. And what we've noticed in playing around with this contrasting tool a lot over the last couple of weeks is that the first part really is the customizable part. And of course, as you get familiar with it and more comfortable with it, you'll play around with all 3 parts of the dialogue tool. But for this really early exercise here, the first part becomes, I don't want you to think I'm unmotivated. I don't want to come across as unaccommodating, inflexible. I don't want to sound like I'm unhappy with my job. I mean, that's kind of like maybe the ultimate one. That's really, I don't want to sound like I'm unhappy and I don't want to work here. I do want to deliver quality work. I do want to be a team player. Can we review what I'm currently working on and see if there's room for adjustment?
Could we suggest ideas on how to address reducing workload?
Yeah.
Like, for example, allocating some part of the work to someone else.
Yes. And I suppose in keeping with our goals here for our audience to really have things be practical, and we've kind of been utilizing this 3 structure. I suppose the 3 things that have come to mind is, can something be moved off my plate? Can a deadline be changed that would reduce kind of current hours and current priority level on certain things? And can variety of hours be something introduced? If this week is super busy for whatever reason, can there be adjustments according to the following week? Our overall goal here is a sustainable work schedule and sustainable work-life balance to maintain performance.
And something has to be said also, that's very often the boss doesn't know how many hours we actually work.
Exactly.
So it brings a kind of level of awareness to the current situation.
Yes. And also another kind of ultimate goal here that would benefit from being identified is this dialogue tool, contrasting, that we're talking about, the ultimate goal is to have an effective conversation with your boss where you're both on the same page, you're both discussing the reasoning behind prioritizing some things, maybe not prioritizing other things. Again, just to echo your point that your boss could be unaware of what you're currently working on, unintentionally kind of offering up more projects or assigning more tasks. And you could also have very different reasoning behind your triage or your priority decisions.
Yes, you mentioned priority, and I think it's a vital part of the equation, because very often when a boss allocates additional work to a direct report, they don't realize, in fact, that they're compromising some of the tasks they've given beforehand. And this person is going to allocate less time or do less quality work on something which is quite important.
Yes.
So ultimately, it affects performance.
And I was just going to add there, Philippe, that we had discussed earlier a tip. This could be a good time to introduce your prevention is better than a cure.
We're talking here about a situation where the problem is already there and we're addressing the problem. So one way to avoid this situation occurring is to preempt it. So prevention is better than the cure, as the old saying goes. That goes definitely for anything to do with medical affairs. And the idea is that when a new task arrives, and I've seen that many, many times with my coaches, is that the boss brings a new idea. So, I've got this idea, or there is this new thing to do. Can you look into it? And at the beginning, it doesn't sound like too much, like a couple, 2-3 hours. And we realize, as the employee realize, that they're going to have to do extra work for that because they're already overloaded with existing work. And unless they sacrifice something else, they won't be able to do the new stuff on time within the same allocated time. So one way to address that issue is to say to your boss, at the moment it occurs, at the moment there is additional workload which lands on our shoulder, is to say, I'm working on this other project. This sounds very interesting, but obviously I'll have to down prioritize other parts of my workload. Which one do you want me to put on hold right now? So put back the responsibility on the boss to decide what part of the work that as an employee I'm currently doing, which has got to be put on hold.
And I think a simple way to tie that up could be, what's the priority level on that?
Yes. So I'm doing X, Y, Z at the moment. Now you want me to do A. So of the X, Y, Z, what should I put on hold in order to do A?
Exactly.
Because then you have a practical conversation and it has to be addressed at the moment the problem occurs, at the moment the new task arrives. So this is the prevention.
Yes. Okay, cool. So have we hit everything? What do you think?
By the way, at the moment of prevention, you can also use the contrasting technique.
Yeah, you're right.
Because you could say, well, the project P11 arrives on our desks. One way to address it is said, that sounds very interesting. I don't want you to think that I'm not committed to doing this new task. And I want to make sure that everything I'm doing at the moment is done to the highest level of quality. What other parts of my work should I put on hold right now in order to be able to tackle P11 properly, or to give P11 the attention it deserves?
Exactly. So the contrasting dialogue tool, again, it's brilliant because it can also be used in a preventative context. When in the workplace with your boss talking about workload and what to prioritize. And it can also be used as more of a check-in further down the line dialogue tool.
Absolutely. So Jackie, now we've explored the various angles of the contrasting technique. Can you give us a summary of it all?
Yes, absolutely. So just to recap what we've gone over in our video today is part one, we really spoke about the context around this situation of having a fear around talking to your boss about your workload and how that conversation can be a challenge, for many people. And in part one, we've emphasized really the first kind of part of this exercise is to be clear about what your current situation is. So part one, clarity. What's your current situation? What are the kind of worst case impressions that your boss could think, that you wouldn't want your boss to think about you as you're bringing up this topic of adjusting your workload? In part two, we explored a dialogue tool called contrasting, based out of this book, Crucial Conversations. I don't want, I do want. And really, again, the three kind of basic intro phrases to that are, I don't want you to think, I don't want to come across as, and I don't want to sound like. And really, just to recap part three, is thinking of this dialogue tool, thinking of this contrasting tool in a capacity as a reparative dialogue tool when an issue has already occurred and kind of is getting to a stressful place, and to also consider it, as Philippe discussed, as a preventative tool. As in most kind of modern workplace environments, they're very dynamic and things are moving at very quick pace. So as a new project or a new task is discussed and kind of presented to you, the contrasting tool is a great way to use at that point in time as a check-in and to prevent your workload from increasing to a place that feels, stressful or unmanageable.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. Could we, just to wrap up, give 3 examples of I don't want, I do want, typical lines?
So 3 scripts.
3 scripts.
3 scripts to play around with and to really verbalize out loud for yourself. Again, they are resting upon the 3 assumptions of we wouldn't want our boss to think that we are unmotivated, uncommitted, that we have poor work ethic, or that we are inflexible or unaccommodating to the current demands of the company. So to tie those in, it would sound like, I don't want to come across as unmotivated for my role or like I'm trying to put in minimal effort. I really do enjoy my job and I want to deliver high quality work. Can we review what's currently on my plate? So that would kind of be, script 1. I don't want you to think I don't want you to think I'm not committed to my role. Again, the part 2 is going to sound very similar. Yeah, just for the sake of our exercise. I really enjoy my job and I want to deliver high quality work within a schedule that is sustainable. Can we review what I'm currently prioritizing? And number 3, I don't want to sound like I'm not flexible or that I'm not available to meet the current demands of this point in time. I really enjoy my job. I want to deliver quality work. I want to be a team player within a schedule that is sustainable for me. Can we review my current projects and triage what's most important for right now?
Is it important to be in the concluding line, to be more specific about the issue of workload? Would the word sustainable be clear enough for the boss to understand that what we're really addressing here is we have too much on our plate?
Yes. What we could do is we could say that, again, just for the sake of our discussion here today, that a few basic desired outcomes regarding workload could be a change in assigned responsibilities, a change in deadlines, and variety in hours. That, I suppose, is what my justification was for the word like sustainable.
Right.
But perhaps that word, could be, a couple other like offerings could be useful for that word.
Yes, because in my experience, it really comes down to a number of hours.
Yeah.
So you find that someone is supposed to work 8 hours a day. and they end up working 10 hours a day.
Yes.
They end up working weekends. So in order to have a constructive conversation with the boss, it's important to bring some clarity. What do you think?
I feel like, there's definitely a balance between basic and practical, and adding in a bit of context to give some ideas on how people can customize it. And I guess my inner kind of radar is from what we've discussed already.
Right.
It feels like we have adjusted it a bit for context, and we have spoken a bit about you could approach it from this way, or you could think about it this way.
One thing that could be said is that we just bring, because the issue is the workload.
Yes.
And we don't exactly spell out the word overloaded, but by bringing the concept of sustainability, then it opens a debate with the boss, where we are going to be explaining in the conversation, by sustainability, we mean that we give some specifics about how many hours. That's where we are entering into the audit part.
I'd like to take a moment and just have a note here on the word sustainable, which we've used in some of our scripts, just to say that word, and also thinking about what feels manageable for you, being very clear on what you'd like and what's currently happening. That really was part of the first exercise in kind of auditing what you're working on, how long it's taking you, what your weekly hours look like, what your daily hours look like, being very clear on that, so that after the contrasting tool is used and you're in an effective conversation with your boss, you are able to brainstorm and explore alternative options to ultimately reduce your workload.
Yep.
And, again, for our purposes here, we really want to be practical. And with that, we have a couple of basic assumptions. But of course, everyone's situation will be very different. And again, the beauty of the contrasting tool is that it can be customized and to your specific situation. So play around with the basics, get really good at the basics, and then you can start to customize and edit it to better fit your needs.
No, it makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Yes, by the way, we have prepared a little PDF that summarizes the contrasting technique and these lines of script you can use. So you are invited to download it.
Yes, we've created a cheat sheet. We've created a contrasting tool cheat sheet and reference for you to support you in this exercise.
Something even that you can use during the conversation with the boss alongside your audit of your current workload.
Yes, exactly. Okay, great. I think we covered everything today, Philippe. I suppose it could be cool to end with a little bit of a coaching moment, in that we want to motivate our listeners to play around with the contrasting tool, maybe to hold themselves accountable to playing with it in the workplace environment with friends and family as scenarios come up, maybe 10 times in the next week. That could be a good
start
goal.
with one. It's actually quite easy to practice if you put your mind to it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us today.
Yes, the idea is to practice it until it becomes second nature.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. I hope you learned something. And obviously, if you like it, give it a thumb up and hit that subscribe button. That would be great.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us. Like, subscribe, comment, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.